I've accomplished my goal and I still have an hour and a half left of my day. I should be doing work. Well, should I? Like, no. If I'm done with my day and I've accomplished all the goals I need to get to my day, I scoot out. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to go outside and go enjoy my day. And the thing is, for the longest time, I felt guilty about that because I'd been conditioned to be like that 9 to 5. It's like, no, it is about the time you put in.
Right. But now I got to ask you a hard question. In your endeavors of your job and your responsibility at Atlassian, how do you measure success for your job?
When teams come together, they need holes in the time that they have that's not filled with anything. They need that dead space.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian. Today I got Mark Cruth from Atlassian, a modern work coach. And I think we're going to have a little bit of fun with this one today, Mark. What do you think?
Alex, we always have fun when we get together, man.
It's amazing. I don't know why. Ronnie says I'm too much of a fanboy. I don't know what to say.
You know what? We just have a good. Well, we got shared roots. We both came up through the same program when we first
Yeah.
got out of school. Back in our days at Boeing, and we both found our kind of both found our callings in Atlassian, and so you know what? We're
I,
just cut from the same cloth, dude.
I would argue you fared a little bit better than me, though.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, you're doing your own thing. You've got your own show. You got your own following. I mean, you're doing pretty good.
I
I mean,
guess I
you
can't.
got a brand, Dr. Jira, right? Dr. Jira.
Yeah, no, it's starting to catch on. I do feel bad. I'm gonna be talking to an actual doctor very
Oh,
soon. And I want to
their
get her
first
opinion
question is
because
going
I'm
to be
gonna have
like, "I
to.
would like to see your diploma."
Well, two things that come to mind. One, I might just change it to what was it, Phineas and Ferb, right? Like something nefarious. Like
Oh
remember Dr.
yeah,
Nefarious? I might have to do like a DKTR Jira,
yeah.
right?
There
Like
you go.
something.
That would be kind of fun. All capitals, like that
Yeah,
should
or
actually
like
be
the
kind of fun.
Cybertruck type of
Yeah,
graffiti type of etching that
yeah.
they got right
Yes, there
now.
you go.
Like that might
I
I
kind
might
of
have to
like
do something
let's.
like
It's like a modern spin. As a modern work coach, I approve.
yeah, just so that it's clear that I'm not trying to like undervalue anybody's doctoral program that they've been through,
Mhm.
right? Um, so so two, but
You know
then
what?
two,
I
I
will admit though, getting up underneath the hood of tools like Jira, I mean, that is a bit of a science. It's understanding, all how it all connects, especially when you get into a complex instance, and it's dealing with even going back to our conversation from Vegas, which we were just mentioning was 2 months ago, which is blows my mind, which it goes back into it's not just about even just dealing with that, it's your bedside manner too. It's figuring out how do you work with these people to set up Jira to actually solve their problems. It's
right.
one thing to just be like, cool, here's your workflow, here's your screens, here's your everything set up. But it's like, all right, cool, you want this, but is that what you really need? And so I think there's something to be said about saying that a lot of the thinking, a lot of the ways of working of a physician kind of comes into what you do.
No, definitely. I think some of the people that I work with, right, they call me part of their Jira healer, right? So I'm
That
kind
you're a
of there.
healer. I like that.
Yeah, it's like, and we've done it like the Jira healing process where a lot of companies use the Atlassian tools and they're in pain, right? Like they have real symptoms of like, we bought this tool, we spent a tremendous amount of money on this tool, but it doesn't work as well as we would like for, right? There's some adjustments that need to be made, almost kind of like a chiropractor, right? Where just a little couple tweaks here and there, and you're using Jira correctly, right? Because it's possible for you to get just started, right? You're inheriting a Jira from legacy 15, 20 years ago. You are maybe coming in blind, not knowing how to set up Jira. So you just set up Jira, right? And then 5, 10 months down the road, 2, 3 years down the road, it's like, okay, we clearly made some mistakes somewhere,
You're
right? It's like,
learning and evolving. That's the thing. And the thing is hindsight's 2020. Every time when we sit back and we look, we're like, oh man, why did I do that? It's like, well, you're probably a team that was probably a fraction of the size that you are now. You're an organization that was, a mere percentage point of what you were. And, again, the world was very different. And I think that's one of the things a lot of admins, they might beat themselves up for something that it's like, no, at the time that made total sense. And now it's learning how to your point, not get stuck and say like, well, that's how we always did it. It's being able to be like, all right, cool, this isn't working. We need to call the doctor. We need that healing session because you know what? It's something doesn't feel right. To your point, the doctor, like all of a sudden you're like, my neck's not feeling good. I'm not gonna be like, you know what? I'll be fine. It's like, no, I'm gonna go see a doctor. And so I think that's the big thing I find is that if they come out and they ask for help, that's the most important thing.
And that's exactly the kind of brand and stuff, the image that I was trying to go with when we came
I
up with this
like
whole thing. It's interesting. I don't know that anybody has ever asked me how it came to be, right? But I had a friend, or I guess she became my friend over numerous visits to the doctor, right? Because she's just like, "Jira's not working for me," and every day was a whole new problem, right? And she would just repeatedly, every time she would call me asking me for help, she's like, "Fix it, Doctor Jira, fix it."
it. Needed to be better.
Yeah, she's just like, "Fix it, please." Like, and so I like, it was either Doctor Jira or like Fix It Jira or something like after Fix It Felix.
Yeah, Felix, I can fix it.
Yeah, so those are my two. So
I
the
don't
the
know.
whole
I don't
doctor,
think the suspenders and the hat would have worked for you, Alex. I'm just gonna be
you don't
honest.
think
I'm
so?
glad you went with Dr. Jira.
I mean, maybe next year, just as a thought for team, right? Because there is the Mario version of the 3D the Mario Maker one, where he does have the
Mhm.
little hard hat.
He
So
does, he does. Actually, that could be really good. Actually, well, you know what? Remember, what was it? Is it Dr. Mario? Is that what the
there is a
old remember,
Dr.
like, the
Mario
old
that's
Dr.
old, like
Mario,
90,
like
yeah,
like
I have that one.
NES Dr.
I still
Mario?
have that game.
Oh, yes, right? That's
You know
what you
what?
gotta
Since
be.
I'm hosting next year, you're coming over, we'll play Dr. Mario on my
Oh my
SNES
gosh.
still.
I haven't played that thing in years, so, like, that's
I still have
amazing.
it. I take tremendous amount of pride in still holding on to every single console that I've ever had in my life.
It's funny, I had to, and I don't know if this is what we're supposed to talk about, but I'm gonna
Oh,
talk
no,
about
this
it
is
anyway.
anything
This is
goes in
great.
paperwork.
Like, I got rid of my NES at one point, and I regretted it, and so I ended up picking up a new one, but I had kept all my old games, and that was the one thing I was happy I did. So, I still got I think if I go back to it, I still have the most used ones were there, of course, like, uh Super Mario, what was it? No, it was Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. That's was that first one, and then you had what was it, the Ninja Turtles one? Was it just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Like that was a great one. I love that NES game. And then of course Contra. I mean, everyone had Contra, right?
I grew up in '89, so I came in at the tail end of NES, and SNES was my first.
Oh,
SNES was my first.
I wasn't too far. I was in '86, so I 86, so I only had a couple
Okay.
years on you. So
Are we that
uh,
close? My wife's an
yeah, we're there.
'86.
We're pretty close, right? Right?
Yeah. No,
Eh.
I
It's the
honestly
white. It's the white in my beard. You should have seen me a few years ago. Like I was like, swear to God, only like 3 years ago, it was all like dark brown. I don't know what it is. In the last few
it's
years,
salt
it
and pepper,
is.
man. Too much salt and
I know,
pepper.
right? Exactly. My wife says I look sophisticated now. So you know what? I'll take that as a compliment. So we'll go with
Yeah,
that.
no, you definitely look a little bit more mature than I would have guessed. I would have not guessed that you were my wife's age.
You would have guessed that I was still south of 40, right? You know what?
Let's not
One
turn
thing,
this
and
into
going
the
back
Mark
to
Cruth
video games
ends
real
up
quick,
hating
just because
Alex
it was.
show.
What was that?
I said, let's not turn this into the Mark Cruth ends up hating Alex for life show.
Oh no, of course I won't. On the funny thing on video games that got me thinking the other day, we were in the car with my kids, and we were talking about I have an Xbox 360, and what got
I
me
got
feeling
22 of
old.
those.
Do you?
I
But
I,
what
I
got me
literally have
feeling
like,
old about this is that I got that Xbox 360 the August after I got married, and I
okay.
thought about it, and I was like, that Xbox 360 is going to be 17 years old this August. I was like, my God, like it feels like I just can't believe it's that old of a machine at this point. It feels like it's like I know there's like Xbox One, but like it doesn't feel like it's that old of a machine, but
I
apparently it
still use
is.
my Xbox
Do
360.
you?
I have a room
I've
I have
not got the
all
red
the
ring of death yet. It still works. Actually, I don't think
really?
it's still
You
it's
you
underneath. It's in the cabinet, and you can't see it because of my thing. It's I have it under like it's packed away in the cabinet here, but I've never got the red ring of death, so I've
I
been so
inherited
far
so
so
many
good.
Xbox 360s over the time. I was doing a count it, or I don't have 22, but I have like 11. And I'm
Mhm.
like, at some point, I don't think I paid $400 a pop for each one of these, but there's each one of these was $400 a
They
pop.
collected up over time, right?
Yeah, so I'm like, no, you can't see them here, but I have more Xbox 360 games than
Well, I
I.
can imagine.
Right.
I mean, I see the Master Chief helmet, and so I mean,
There you
I
go.
got to
There you go.
imagine that you are an Xbox guy.
I used to work as a Microsoft rep at my university, kind of like part of the
Oh,
marketing
I
team.
remember people who did that back at school. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did
Yeah.
that. So every 3 or 4 weeks, I'd come home to like a box full of games that I'd have to give out. So
Oh,
naturally, I'd keep a
snap.
copy for myself and give everything else away.
Exactly. So you were indoctrinated there, right? At that point.
Yeah, no, I literally had every game. Really, really small world story that you know how people talk about this whole small world thing, like
Yeah.
somebody, yeah. The trippiest thing happened to me around 2020, right around when COVID hit. I might
Mhm.
have been the tail end of 2020. I was sitting on a bunch of games, right? Like
Mhm.
this is 2020. I did the whole college thing experience. I graduated in 2012, so good 8, 9 years had passed from when I ended that. So I was like, you know what? I think the statute of limitations of when like Microsoft can reclaim these or get me in trouble because
Yeah,
I
exactly.
haven't
That's fast.
because
They're
I
not gonna
didn't.
come hunting.
Yeah, they're not gonna come hunting for me. So I'm like, my wife's like, why don't you just get rid of them? And I had just quit my job. You know what? Never mind. It was 2021 because I had just quit my job. And I'm like, great. So I told my wife, I'm like, okay, so I quit my job. So how are we gonna feed ourselves? And she's like, well, you have the garage full of crap you don't use.
Sell
so
that.
so she's like, sell all that. So I'm like, okay, let me put I had like 18 copies of Halo 3 ODST, right? Brand new in wrapper. And so I put one up on eBay and somebody locally to where I live bought it. And then he's like,
Uh-huh.
"Hey, can you package it real well and make sure it's like super nice?" I'm like, "Well, you live in the same city as me, so why don't I just drop it off at your house?"
Yeah, I'll just meet you somewhere.
Yeah. So he invites me over to his house, and I go right, and and as I'm getting there, he's like, "Well, do you have more?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got like 17 more copies." He's like, "Well, why don't you bring the whole thing over? I'll take a look. I'll buy them all off your hands." Right? So I put big old box of games in my car. We drive down the street, and we're going to like the bougie part of town, right? So
Oh,
I tell
this
my
is like
wife,
the part where you're like, "Oh, like I'm gonna get yelled at for being here."
"Well, I'm from the hood as well, right?" So, well, I'm not. My wife is, but I had a girl. I grew up with that whole LA vibe that we did back in February. That's
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm a little
I
bit more.
remember you telling me about that,
Yeah,
exactly.
so I'm like, I'm a little bit more comfortable in that kind of a situation, right? So I told my wife, I'm like, there's no possible way we're gonna get mugged by this total stranger that we met on the internet. Because look at these houses, like
You just
just their
look around, there's
driveway,
like, "This is no way we're gonna get mugged out here. This is
right?
just not the place."
It's not the place. So I get up to the guy's house. He looks through all the games, and but because I changed the term, right? I changed the shipping term. I couldn't complete the sell on eBay,
Oh.
right? And so I was like, "Well, crap, what do we do?" But there's like a way for the buyer to acknowledge that he received it or something. So I'm in his front door, and I left my wife and kids in the car,
Mhm.
and it's like 15 minutes later, and I haven't come back.
She's like,
And
"He totally got stabbed. He
yeah, my
totally got
wife's like,
stabbed."
my wife's panicking. She is panicking, and I'm like, we're trying to just figure out because this is an older gentleman, and he doesn't know how to use the internet very well. And I'm trying to like look at his eBay and without
Oh,
going
yeah,
into a
you're
total
sitting over
stranger's
looking
house.
over his phone, it's like, "Oh, yeah, if you select this right
You're right,
here."
yeah. So I'm trying to like do tech support and try not to be that creepy person on the internet. And I'm also meeting with the creepy person I just met on the internet. It's like the weirdest things. And I'm sitting with like potentially thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise
Right?
in front, right? So it's all like a recipe for disaster. And at the end, I was like, you know what? You seem like a great guy. We'll just take it offline. I'll submit a report, like a support ticket with eBay. We'll figure it out. Let's just do the cash transaction for the games. And he's like, here, take my phone number or my email, and let's figure it out. When he gives me his last name, I go, you wouldn't happen to have a son named, I forgot his son's name, right? He goes, yeah, that's my son. I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah. So when I started working at Northrop, my coworker, his dad just bought all these games off of me.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. It was like, and so
Oh,
from
that's
like immediately,
amazing.
yeah, so immediately we went from like strangers to like best friends.
Oh, yeah, all of a sudden, now you're starting to swap stories and
Yeah, now
oh, that's super
I
cool.
got the wife and the kids out of the car. I'm like,
Now all of a sudden
"Okay."
your wife's approaching, looking out, be like, "All right, do I need to do something here?"
Yeah. Then we texted his son. He came over. We had a blast.
Oh
Like it was
god,
like
that's awesome. You probably got to connect with him. You hadn't seen him, and oh, that's
right,
awesome.
it was so many years, right? And then like COVID shut everything down. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was like a great little reunion. It was such a small world, and it was all because of these Xbox 360 games that I'm sitting on
I
top.
love that. You know what? Microsoft can bring people together from time to time, can't they?
Almost just as good as Atlassian.
Almost. Almost.
Almost. We're very careful there.
Oh, I love it.
But
And it really is a small world with those sorts of things. It's amazing how well, and it's like again, I still go back to like our story where again, you and I both were in that same Boeing program, and we just happened to like our paths barely. I think I was done with the program as you were coming into the program,
yeah, because you were on the
and just the
2 year, and
fact that we were like, oh, you were at Boeing, I was, and then we find out that, and it still blows my mind. I was like, I've never
same
met
rotation
anybody
program.
else beyond the people that were ever in that program that I knew at that time. So it
Right.
was a small world.
No, definitely. But I didn't want to. I know we're talking about video games, but I, I I wanted to take a step deeper into it, right? Because
Ooh.
video games was a big, huge foundation for me, right?
Hmm.
And when I see you, when I see Sven, I see the concept of gamification and teamwork go pretty well hand in hand, right? Especially when
Hmm.
you're trying to do like icebreakers or trying to get people to trust each other.
Yeah.
Any inspirations that you get from a video game background
I would
to
say I
help
think it's
improve?
the aspect of play. Honestly, it's the aspect of play that for me is I think a lot of times in work we consider the aspect of play to be something that doesn't belong in work. We think it's something that is something for kids. We think it's something we do in our leisure time. But the real thing about play is that play is about creativity. It's about exploration, and really in the world of really what we consider modern work. If we think about knowledge work, it is all about creativity. Is I think about AI. AI is it's all about being able to figure out how we get creative with things like that. And so for me, I think that's one of the things that is missed. And I think one of the things that our generation brings into the workplace that many our generations kind of lacked is that sense of play because we grew up on video games. We grew up playing, and we realized that it was more than just sitting there with a controller. We realized it was teamwork. It was collaboration. Like I remember sitting there, um, networking. What was it? 4 Xboxes
Xboxes?
together to do
I did that.
Halo nights. And you know what? And those were the thing was is we had fun, but what we did is we learned how to coordinate with each other. We learned how to collaborate, and those were skills that kind of brought us back out to that have translated out into the big kid world. We might think about it. And so I think play
Yeah.
is something that as we think about the work we do, and I think about helping teams work together, everything I try to do, and I always joke about this when I do workshops with people, I say, you know what, you may or may not learn something new, but what I'll guarantee is you will have fun. And it says, because I always try to introduce some sort of play into what I do, because I honestly believe it makes content sticky. Like that's the stuff people remember. People remember when they play an activity called the pirate ship game that then all of a sudden yeah, because I know, yeah, that
That's
where
my favorite
they
one.
do the pirate ship game and then they remember the pirate ship game. And that's to me like that's what play is, and that's what video games taught me. and
So,
things like that. Things of how do you get creative. So I think that's something that we could see more, we could use more of in the workplace. And I really hope that through intentional practices, even through like intentional collaboration. At Atlassian, we do things like we call it intentional togetherness. It's where we get together to connect because we are distributed. I want to see us introduce more play as part of that time because that's what helps build connection. It helps build relationships, all that sort of stuff.
yeah, but it almost feels like every time that I've had these phenomenal experiences, even with the pirate ship, right? That 30 minutes, 45 minutes of bonding with your team, you almost
Mm.
feel a sense of guilt. Because like
Mm.
work's not supposed to be fun. Work's not supposed to be laughing and having fun. Like, how do how do we
And that,
overcome
don't
that?
you love that conditioning that we've received? Don't you love that? You know, exactly. It's like who I think about this as like how and I'll admit you're not wrong because I still feel that way at sometimes. I'm like, or even things
Are we
like
getting paid to do something
yeah,
for
I'm
the
getting
team?
paid to do this. Or it also comes down to the things when we think about outcomes over outputs. This aspect of like, oh, I've accomplished my goal and I still have an hour and a half left of my day. I should be doing work. Well, should I? Like, no, if I'm done with my day and I've accomplished all the goals I need to get to my day, I scoot out. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna go outside and go enjoy my day. And the thing is for the longest time I felt guilty about that because I'd been conditioned to be like that 9 to 5. It's like, no, it is about the time you put in. And I think that's and again, that's what has held so many organizations back is because again, if I am fixated on the output of my time, if I am fixated on I do the job, I'm not going to actually be fixated on what I'm trying to do. I'm not going to be fixated on the actual goal at the end of the day, at the end of the line. And so for me, I think things like play and the fact that it's like, oh, we feel guilty. It's one of those things where over time we just have to continue to, I don't know, edge into it a little bit. I think if I were to throw you into an environment where you're playing all the time, you would feel a fish out of water. You wouldn't feel comfortable for most people because they're like, to your point, there's like a guilt in it. But if I incorporate it in, if I bring it in through facilitated activities, it starts feeling more natural and I can start
Mhm.
using it and harnessing it back actually like a tool at that point.
And I think not enough companies can appreciate how valuable this is because one of the teams that I felt closest with, I've been in my career almost as long as you, right? But one of the teams that I felt the closest with, the one that I bonded with, the one that I just felt more like a family, was a
Hmm.
team that I never even saw. I
Oh,
couldn't like if you put a roster of 20 people in front of me
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
said I worked with these 20 people, I
You would have
can
no idea.
I would no idea. I have no idea what they look like. I can probably hear their voice because we spent a lot of
Hmm.
time audio. This was back in my Boeing days, right? So cameras and security and
Oh
all
yeah,
that
no
stuff.
one had cameras on. Yep.
Nobody had cameras on those. But I remember so vividly and so fondly of doing server upgrades starting at 10, 11 o'clock at night
Hmm.
and watching a Seattle Mariners game because my entire team was in Seattle. And
Hmm.
one guy, one of the older guys, having the game on, and we were all just, upgrading, clicking
Yep.
away, and just listening to the game, right? Just as a
Yep.
team. And it was
Yep.
these things where like you wouldn't watch a baseball game during work hours,
Yeah.
right? But because it was off after hours, like it's just something that we came to do.
It
Where
kind of
we
felt like it's like, oh, I can do this, right?
yeah,
Exactly.
but it felt right, and it felt so good, and we would bond like these memories that we were creating. We'd be talking about our family and our kids, and
Yeah.
we're still everybody's kind of just like because clicking on it, like putting server keys and like doing server upgrades is like next,
Yeah.
next, next, watch paint dry,
No,
right?
you
So
know,
like
right, exactly. It's like, all right, now we sit there and wait.
yeah, so there was a lot of like times for us to like, okay, so we're waiting. We obviously gotta be here, so we listening to the game or talking about our kids or this activities or stuff like that. And again, there's just that it wasn't play per se, but it was this very fun, just
Yeah.
getting to know each other on a smaller or on a more casual level, right? That really created this huge bond for me that I think from a teamwork and effectivity perspective, it did wonders for us because
Oh,
we
it's probably
were like
huge.
unstoppable.
See, this is where, and I love that story because it reinforces this belief I have that when teams come together, they need time, they need holes in the time that they have that's not filled with anything. They need that dead space, because what gets filled in that dead space is the personal stories, the questions to each other, things like that that actually help us connect as people. Because so often, and I see this with organizations today, one of the biggest issues I see with both hybrid work and distributed work or remote work is when teams come together. So there are those opportunities. Like even at Atlassian, we try to come together a couple times a year for teams to actually come together, see each other, work together. Is that when they do that, the the fallacy is that they say, "Oh, we have to maximize our time together." They fill out the agenda. We're going to do all these things. It's going to be great, and they try to plan it all out. And the problem is they don't leave any time for them to even kind of think about and be bored together and ask questions with each other. And so for me, the I've found that like if you give yourself that time, you start exploring those things. Like my team, we did an offsite earlier this year, and it was fascinating. We did it was like a 15K walk. It was something crazy up and down the coastline in Sydney back in January. And we started walking. And you know what? The first 30 minutes of that walk was all professional, it was all work. And then after about 30 minutes, we exhausted the work conversation. And then it got quiet for a moment. And then when someone started asking about somebody's kids, and then they started asking about what they did over the holidays. And then all of a sudden, for the next 2 or 3 hours, we just talked about each other's personal lives, their dreams, their hopes, things like that. And that's what builds the connection. That's what builds the relationships. And so I think having that opportunity, just like you did, where all of a sudden, if you had been sitting there doing migrations and you were constantly working, even if you had that game on, but you were just constantly working the whole time, I would venture to bet maybe the relationship wouldn't have been the same. But because you had some of that downtime, like you said, watching paint dry, you had the time where you're like, we have to be on the phone together. We're watching this. Hey, you got kids?
Yeah.
It's like, tell me how many kids you got.
Right.
We fill that space, and I think that's something so many groups miss. And I think that's something when I think about like really high performing teams, not a lot of people think about that. They think that high performing teams, they've got each other figured out. They're fully aligned, all that. Well, they are, and they have great working agreements. They're fully aligned. They understand what each other's doing. But what differentiates the best from the legendary is going to be those ones that have that sense of connection.
Right.
And really the legendary ones are the ones that people say, that was my favorite team. Just like you said, like that was the one I remember. Because you know what? I have a very similar story where it was just like that, where it was a team where I remember watching cricket, where we were doing very similar things. It was late night deployments where was nothing we could do. And we just sat there watching cricket while scripts ran for 4 or 5 hours, and we would get to know each other. And again, I think back at best team I was ever on. But was it? Probably not from a productivity perspective, but it was from a people perspective.
But I do think those two can go hand in hand, right? So
Oh, 100%.
like right now, one of the teams that I work with, we intentionally carve out 30 minutes out of our day to just
Mhm.
chat, to just what who pissed you off today
Yeah,
conversation,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
Right? Like, because the number of Jira tickets that I get and the craziness of the requests that I get sometimes, I'm like,
Mhm.
I just need to blow some steam because
Yep.
somebody just asked me to like do something that goes against everything I stand for in Jira.
It's
Right?
funny. We did I'm helping. So my boss is Dom Price, and so Dom is he gets the opportunity to talk with some very cool people, and we're doing this new webinar series with him where he is talking with some legends out there. And one person he talked to is a legend out of Australia. Her name was Dr. Gemma King. She's like a sleep psychologist. And one of the things she recommended was that she said he asked her a question. He's like, "What's one thing you would recommend as that every working professional do to have like a better life?" And she actually said, you know, make sure you have a confidant. So to your point, make sure you have somebody you can go talk to and vent to, and like just have you know share stuff with. She says she says there are studies that show that people who don't have that are like 40% more likely to die of like a heart attack or
Really?
like something. Yeah, it's crazy, crazy stats. And so she says it's because it's a people thing. We need that outlet. And I think what's the line? Was it stress shared is stress halved? The fact that we have someone to share it with kind of lessens it on us. And so, just to your point, it's being that having those people being able to share that with somebody is a hugely impactful thing, just to be for our own physical and mental selves.
Yeah, no, definitely from a mental, physical perspective, I can definitely see it. When we do come together physically, like we do go on a walk together, we go have
I love
lunch
it.
together. So we we cherish our time together so much
Hmm.
more
Yeah,
because we get to like hug each other versus
I
not.
know, right? Versus you have the 9 box.
Yeah. But the other thing that it does from a productivity perspective that I've noticed, right, is I don't feel like I take orders when we're working together, right? Like it's always
Hmm.
me doing a favor for a friend now, right?
Yeah.
And so my productivity goes up because instead of me coming up with an excuse from like I don't want to do this or I'm not in the mood, it's just like I jump at it, right? I just get on it and within minutes we usually accomplish what most people take weeks,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like, because we were just on a call that I had just tuned out completely. It was my lead and another again this team that we get together for 30 minutes every day, and I'm having breakfast and I completely tune out the conversation because I'm eating, and then
Oh
they're
yeah.
like, "Hey Alex, what do you think?" And I was like, "Well, crap, I wasn't paying attention." Right? So I started asking questions, but because we know each other so well, they know that my questions aren't like bad, right? They're not from
Yeah. Yeah.
me. They weren't me like an attack, right? They were me like because they know
You
how I
just being
think.
curious, right?
Yeah, they know I was just being curious, and I was also kind of making up for the fact that I wasn't paying attention. So I'm trying to get some data, and we got into a very healthy debate about
Hmm.
why certain decisions were being done and certain designs going the way they were.
Hmm.
And we turned this like 2 week endeavor that the lead was like, it's gonna take us like 2 weeks to craft this
Yeah.
document that we need to do. And like we knocked it out in like 2 solid hours of just a
Yep.
very healthy debate that we were having because we can challenge each other. We trust each other to the point where we can like
Hmm.
question and go, no, doesn't feel right. And let me tell you my 3 reasons why. And he'd come back with me like, well, here's my 3 reasons why this is wrong. And I'd be like, I agree with 2 out of the 3, but this is why this is not right. And we meet somewhere in the middle and then like but it took like this very scary endeavor of like man how why like this document we got to complete an author and we got it done in like 2 hours. It was just crazy because
Well, I
like
think
I don't think it
I think you
happens if
just
you
hit
don't.
the nail right on the head there. Is like you got the trust, and like you have that connection builds trust, and because you have that trust, you're like, all right, cool, we can work through this. It's not like a positioning. It's not like a
But any other
peacocking.
team, yeah, but any other team that doesn't have that trust, it's like it's a challenge, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're being difficult. You don't want to participate. You don't want to cooperate.
Yep.
You just want to stop the progress, right? But
Yeah.
it's not really stopping progress because when you believe in it, right? Like when you're working for the greater good, you need that healthy debate, but you can't have healthy debate if you
Hmm.
think that somebody's trying to take your job or get you fired or whatever it is, right?
Right. And I think that's where, and to your point there with that productivity, I think that's where when you have that connection as a team, that opportunity for productivity is that door is just swung right open. You have that ability to walk through that because all of a sudden, and that's the thing, if you have clarity on all these things, then now it's easy. It feels like teamwork becomes easy versus, I've worked with teams before where we don't have that connection. Like, I'll be honest, I've worked with teams that I do not connect with the people. It's just like, it just never happened. And it just, teamwork felt hard. And for me, and I think that's one of those big things, you see those deltas and you can see why maybe productivity when you look out there in industry and they talk about how like, wow, we're not as productive as we used to be and things like that. I can get it. I can get it if teams aren't connecting, if people are not being able to connect and have that same kind of, relationship that they had. I can totally get why productivity could be hard, because it's like teamwork is hard.
Yeah, but the part I find the most I don't want to say hypocritical, right? But it's the ironic part, I guess. I don't know. English is hard for me, right? But you gotta invest in the play. You gotta invest in the non-productivity part to get the
Yes.
productivity. You can't
Yep.
measure. You can't measure it, but it's gonna be there. And it comes in such a powerful way if you just trust in it.
Yep. I worked for a company and they had a lot of values, and one of the ones that has always stuck with me because it just always resonated with me was that it was dollars and cents follow, they don't lead. In that it's just that aspect that i- if you trust the process, if you invest in the non-tangible, like that's where you see the productivity gains. That's where you see if you spend money on like, and there was even like for the longest time on like LinkedIn, there was this thing floating around about like L&D budgets and like a CEO asking a CFO being like, how much money are we spending on L&D? And the CFO saying like, oh, this much money. It's like, well, what if we cut that? And he says, well, then people won't be learning. It's like, well, that's okay. And he says, okay, but then they won't be. But what if they? How did it go? It was like, what if they leave? Oh no, that's what it was. What if we pay for them to learn and then they leave? He says, yeah, that'd be a problem. He says, but what if we don't pay for them to learn and then they
They
stay?
stay.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's what it is, and it's like it's same idea. It's that aspect that yeah, to get the tangible, you have to invest in the intangible.
Which is a tough pill to swallow if you're just penny pinching,
Yep, and
right?
and
Or
that's where
bean
we're in this
counting,
weird economy
bean
right now
counting.
where
Yeah,
everybody started pinching pennies, and
and counting the
it's like
beans.
it's a pendulum game too, and that's
Yeah,
that's what this economy has been really weird, and I haven't been very happy with it. Is that aspect of so many companies has swung the pendulum versus trying to be very smart and strategic about it.
I
And
think
now all of a sudden, now they're hiring people back that they just laid off, and I'm like, you hired people back you just laid off. That means that you did it for your balance sheet. You didn't actually think about what it was you were trying to do. You weren't thinking about the tangible and the intangible. Oh,
yeah, I think you see that so evident. I think Google being one of my dream companies. I was just rewatching the internship movie last
oh
night,
yeah, I love that movie.
and my favorite movie. I don't know if I told you, but I got a job at Google in 2022.
Did you really?
I went through 18 rounds of interviews,
Ooh,
and I passed. I got them all,
you got them
and
all.
I got them all, and I got the whole "Welcome to Google" email, and I accepted it on a Friday. Turned in my resignation on that Friday, and I didn't sleep for 2 straight days.
Holy cow, dude.
So it just didn't feel right. It didn't. It didn't. Like
There was a disturbance in the force, right?
it
You're
was.
like,
It was
oh,
the weird. It was the most weirdest surreal thing because it was like I thought it was everything I've ever wanted,
hmm
and I worked my butt off for it, and I had like the whole for not only was it 18 rounds of interviews, but it was 18 months of interviews too.
oh yeah, like it
And
was
it was,
an ongoing process,
yeah,
probably.
it was a very huge investment mentally and physically and emotionally. And I consulted with every single person that has ever coached me or guided me throughout
hmm
my career, through my life. And everybody was like, "You'd be an idiot to walk away from Google." And I'm like, "But my conscience is not letting me sleep at night."
Yeah, like I'm literally like, there's something physically wrong with me right now
Right.
because of this.
And so we reflected, my wife and I were like this against everybody's better judgment and against my dreams of like I wanted that welcome to Google since I remember
Yeah.
the first time I stepped on Google's campus, which was July of 2008. I
Oh
went
wow.
on a tour there when I was in college, and it was like the dream job, right? Which CS major
Didn't
didn't want
want
to
to
work
work for
at Google?
Google, especially back then too. I mean, you think
Yeah,
about that, like in wow.
but I almost feel like I dodged the bullet because when I rejected it, that's when the pendulum swung,
Ooh.
right? It
And they
swung
were
to the
and that's the thing. It would have been terrible to be there, and then all of a sudden you're there a month and a half, and then
and
all of a sudden,
that's exactly what it
yep, and
played
then
out
all
to
of a
be because
sudden we're like, "Oh, sorry." All of a sudden you try to log in and you have no access, and you're
you're
like,
right.
"What?"
And
Yeah.
that's exactly why I bring it up, right? This the story is like Google's one of the companies where like it was a lot of play, right? It was a
Mhm.
lot of we believe in our people, we believe in giving them autonomy, we believe in empowering them to be the decision makers and challenge whatever they need to challenge. But at some point, they became this company that we need to make a profit. I don't know. Like, where did it all come from?
I know, I know. It's like there's to your point there is that balance of profitability and play, and I don't think that they are mutually exclusive from each other. I honestly think if you it just like the early days in probably Google, you saw that aspect of play and profitability play out really well, and I think that's where I think there's there's profitability, and then there's excessive profitability. And then I think maybe that's where we find ourselves in a weird spot, especially in Wall Street. Like, you find yourself trying to beholden to the stakeholder, to the shareholder, and your goal is to maximize their profits. And it's like, well, at what cost? And this is where I always go back to um what is it, David Marquette. He wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around, and they talk about intentful leadership, purposeful organizations, and I just think that the modern organization, I think the really it's going to be the organization of the future, the one that is really going to survive this kind of crucial time right now, is going to be the ones that figure out how to balance that out and give the this new generation too that's coming into the workforce the purpose they want, the play that they need, but then also be able to get the profits that a company's there to make. And I think that finding that balance is that's the sweet spot. And good leaders will help find that. Bad leaders will ultimately be pushed out of an organization if they just profit hungry.
Right. Yeah, and the new generation that's coming in, like my kids,
Mm,
they're just not motivated the same way.
mm-mm.
My motivations, I am of the belief as of like 2 weeks ago, I only work on
This is newfound belief.
the reason is not I feel like this episode is all about me showing off, but I just paid off my mortgage, right? I
Oh
think
yeah,
I had told you.
telling me that you were like right in this point where you
Yeah.
were like it was
Yeah,
it was about you.
I sent the final check a few weeks ago, and so I told my wife, I'm like, "Okay, so everything we've been working on for the last 6 months, it accumulates to this moment. I only wanna work on things that make me happy at
Yeah,
this point, like, things that I care about, things that I profoundly
yeah,
want to work on." And it changes my perspective because, like, I I I do the work that I want to do. I do
yeah.
work that fulfills me as opposed to I'm not here to just make a buck because I don't need the
Yeah.
buck anymore.
I think it goes back to you're here to build your dream. You're not here to build somebody else's dream. You're not here to just make somebody else's make a dollar. You've elevated yourself to almost like that. There's a thing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've moved past some of these levels to the point where you can actually see some of that fulfillment because there are and that's where I always feel bad for there are lots of folks who they're struggling to get by. They can barely just make that mortgage payment. And so it's like, how do we honestly as a society, how do we help level that playing field a little bit more? Because there's these too many people who are like they're trying to do all the right things and they can't. And they can't see that opportunity to do something that they love. They have to just grind it out and constantly just try to battle it out. And so I think it's amazing that you've got to that point and now you can pursue that dream. And now it's like, how do we help others get to that point? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. That's what it is. I've been reading some books around some like entrepreneur books recently, and it really comes down to again taking ideas, playing with them, and following the ones that resonate with you too. And so I love that you like again follow one the things that you want to do. Don't just follow that dollar. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Another day at work. You used to do because you had that. You had that experience, right? You can go do that. Yeah. Mm, yeah. I think it's gonna give them it's gonna show them what's possible, and I think that mhm. Which honestly, I think that's good because I think that's we need people coming out, and to your point, in the next generation, we need people who don't want to just do who don't just do the same thing that we've always done. Because I think work is still broken. I still think as organizations scale, we haven't figured that out how to do that as companies, as big companies. No, I've not met a big company yet that has figured out how to scale gracefully. I mean, we haven't scaled gracefully yet, I would say, even as Atlassian. And I think that's where it's going to take new generations to help us figure out how do we do that in a way that it may not even be scaling. It may be something completely radically different, but it takes kids experiencing their parents having a completely different life to actually be able to think outside the box to that, I think.
Right. But now I gotta ask you a hard question. In your endeavors of your job and your responsibility at Atlassian, how do you measure success for your job? Because I would assume that it's a very hard needle to move.
It's funny. I literally had a conversation today with some of our team members around like how do we measure success because it really is a squishy metric, and for us it comes down to we look at things like reach, we look at things like you know uh impact from a do people follow the content we share. So when I talk about things like the Atlassian team playbook, do they go to that? But ultimately, at the end of the day, the way that I really look at impact, if I'm talking about me specifically too, is it comes back down to after a presentation, after one of these, like we doing this thing right now. If I've got one person who is like goes out there and they try something different and they reach out to me and they say, hey, I tried this thing, it was a really great idea, or they reach out and says, I really love that idea you shared, can you send me a link because I want to go try that. I find
I keep you
that's
sending.
like my personal level of yeah, there we go, exactly.
I keep you
You've got
sending
the
so when people
cards.
talk, I'm like, scan.
Yep, exactly. It's stuff
Scan and
like
learn.
that. Yep. And to me, that's what I find rewarding. For me, of like, I think about what fulfills me because if I'm after leads and if I'm after butts and seats, I
No,
don't want to do this job anymore. That's not fulfilling for me. What I'm
no,
after is saying like, hey, did you try something new? The fact that you talk about that pirate ship game, almost every time we come together, tells me I left an impact. And that to
and
me
it's a
is my
snowball
measure
of
of
an
success.
impact. it's a snowball of an impact because even once I ran it with one of my teams, like they have gone internally
Then
to
they
their
went
team.
and they were like, "Oh, hey, did you try this?" And to me, that's my mindset on that. Is that, you know what? If someone tried this, they're gonna have tried this with a team. And then that team member is likely going to be like, even if one of their team members like, "Oh, that was great," they might go to a new team and then try it, or go to the playbook and find a new play. And to me, that's where it's that it's that network kind of approach. It's that it will spawn out as we go, and for me,
Organically.
that's what's fulfilling for me out of this, and why I do it. At the end of the day, and I love it. Like just the other day, I got a note from somebody saying like, "Oh, hey, you know what? I love that network of teams we did, and it showed me a whole new level of teams I didn't even know we had that we were working with. That just, I'm going to go run this with this next group." And I was like, oh, like that. I know. I'm like, cool. They saw the value. They're going to go do it. That's all I needed.
And it's so interesting that Atlassian does this, right? Because you guys are really owning the team aspect of productivity, right?
I mean,
And
goes right back to down to the was the stock ticker team, right? Our whole
yeah,
goal is around the team, and I think for me, I think I'm glad that we have held close and firm to our mission. That unleash that potential of every team. The whole thing for us is to find ways to do it, and you know what? We're gonna do it with some super creative ways with our software. We're going to create new ways to use our tools, super creative new tools, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is tools is only half that battle. And so the fact that we invest in the other half too,
yeah,
that I think is so important, because so many other organizations I see, they invest in the tool part. They might give some lip service to the practice side of the house, but they don't do much there. And so for us, uh it gives me hope that we are going in the right direction when we actually do try to combine both that tools that we produce with the practices that we follow, and we share it out there.
and I think that's so critical too, right? Because maybe Wall Street might not appreciate it, but it helps all your customers out in the long run.
Hmm.
Because most places that I look at or that I work with, everybody's just lost. Like there's no North Star. And I think it's super
Hmm.
valuable that Atlassian goes and says, you know what, we're gonna spitball internally, figure it out how it should work, and then we're gonna
Exactly.
publish it. And then we're gonna publish it so that
Exactly.
you
And
guys
we're going to
can
try
follow
it,
along.
and I think that's the thing. And for us, that's what it is. It's that constant experimentation.
Super valuable. I think just when I look back at my entire career now, given this conversation, it's like had I been more mature, had I known this information, like the decisions that I would have done in my career, the conversations I would have had, the conversations I wouldn't have had,
Mm.
right? Just how different life or career or your job would be.
Oh, I know. If you would have made a decision a little bit differently, right? I always think, it's amazing the things that you wonder where the path would have went. There's a, I always, I have a, I've one day I'm going to create a podcast that is going to be all about the forks we make in life. I've decided, because I'm fascinated by these stories from people where it's like you you may, again, it's like the butterfly effect. You all of a sudden you made a decision, like, actually even yours to not go to Google has likely made a significant impact to even where you are right
It
now.
it
uh
has, and my wife and I literally were talking about that yesterday. Because as I finished the movie, my as soon as I turned it off, my knee-jerk reaction to her was like, "Did I make the biggest mistake of my life
and
turning that thing down?" And she's like, "Look at everything you've achieved that you didn't by not going to Google."
mhm.
And I'm like, "Well, what did I achieve?" And then she's like, "Um."
Well, it is fascinating because then you start adding up the little things and you're like, holy
Yeah, no,
cow,
so we
the
took tally last night. We took
yeah,
tally,
exactly. You start adding it up and you're like,
and
oh
I'm like, "Damn."
wow. Like if I would have done this, I probably wouldn't have started this channel. I probably wouldn't have done this thing. I probably wouldn't have done that. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's a lot. And I think that's what's quite fascinating, just to see, especially like I'm an accounting major by trade. Imagine if I would have went into accounting, like what It's like I always think back to that. I'm like, what if I had an opportunity at a school. It's funny. Before I went to Boeing, I had an opportunity to work at a company in Michigan, Dow Chemical. They make like fiberglass stuff and things like that. I'd interned with them. I had an opportunity to go with them, and I had a job. It was all set, good money coming out of school. It was like coming out. It was like 2009. It was like 65K a year. I mean, it was good money at that time, and the market was kind of rough, and so they're going through some layoffs. And I got a call from the manager for the internship program that I was part of, and he says, "Hey, I just want to let you know we're going through some layoffs right now, but your job is safe." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But it was when he called me that I was like, "So my job has the potential of maybe not being safe,"
Being
and my
safe.
mind started racing. And this was like December 17th or something like that. He calls me. The cutoff to apply for Boeing was like December 21st for the ITCFP program at the time. And I just happened to find it. I applied. They had one final cohort that was going in for applications in January. Someone saw my application, thought it was decent one. I went out, applied. I did good at the interview. I got an offer. It was in Seattle. My wife told me she would only move to two places because we were married at the time. Two places, and after school it'd be Michigan or Seattle because she was obsessed with Seattle. It was out in Seattle, so I was like, all right. But it was less money, and I was like, but it's a surefire job. And the other one said it seemed maybe, and so I took it, and now this is where I'm at now. Who knows where I would have been, but
Yeah, no, and
certainly wouldn't have been here.
especially since Boeing is, I'm assuming you joined before 2010, then no, or no, you were
Yeah,
joined right
I,
at
I joined
2010.
in 2009.
But
Yeah,
then that means, when did Boeing get rid of their pension program?
in 2000. I was the first class to not get a
That
pension.
not get the because
Yeah,
that
not get one.
see, because I joined in 2010 as an intern,
Hmm.
right? But yeah, you catching it in 2009. Had your life just been 12 months
Even a
earlier,
year earlier, I know a
you're
lot
that
of
would have been a
people that
career.
stuck around for
Yeah,
that
that would have
pension.
been a career for Boeing, right? Because
Yeah,
every person that was miserable and hated the job in my entire
yeah.
life
They had that
was because
pension though.
they had those pensions.
Yep.
You can't walk
Yeah,
away from a
that's
pension.
exactly it. It's amazing. And I think it's such a fascinating space to play with because I think we all have those stories if we dig deep enough to find those forks. And again, it's all a bunch of what ifs, but it's like you start adding up the things that we have. It just makes you appreciate where you're at right now. You're like, wow. It's like,
You
wow,
should talk to
that
my dad because my dad has had the same job at the same position, the same everything for the last 40 years. No
wow.
what ifs with my dad, just one
No
if.
what ifs.
That was 40 years ago.
I bet there's some what ifs. I bet we could find something. I bet we could
Ah.
find something.
Anyways, Mark, thank you so much. I know we're right at the hour here, so I want to take a second here to thank you for joining me on this little
It's always a
endeavor, and
pleasure talking with
hope
you,
you
Alex.
appreciate it, or hope you enjoyed it.
Always do. Always do. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we'll have to bring you back for this is the first time on the main channel, so
There you go.
looking forward
Exactly. We'll do a follow up some point,
yeah.
right?
All right, Mark. Well, thank you very much for being a great sport, and appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.